There are moments inside royal palaces the public is never supposed to see. And this was one of them. On a quiet winter morning, Prince George heard 6 words he was never meant to hear, and within seconds he broke down in tears. This wasn't about royal duty. This wasn't about headlines. It was about his little brother and a diagnosis that would quietly change everything. But what exactly did he hear, and why did it hit him so hard? It was a quiet morning inside the palace when Prince George heard words he was never meant to hear. His nanny's voice cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the unmistakable way truth slips out when someone is trying too hard to keep it contained. A sentence meant for adult ears drifted into the corridor, and in an instant, George's world shifted. The tears came fast, not because of titles or duty, but because the words were about his little brother, Prince Louis, and a diagnosis that changed everything. There were no cameras, no warning, no official briefing, just a child realizing that life inside their home would never feel the same again. It happened on a cold winter morning in December 2025 deep inside Windsor Castle. The day had begun like so many others, breakfast served neatly, routines moving with the quiet precision the palace depended on. Toast, scrambled eggs, a glass of orange juice. Familiar sounds, familiar order. But then, as George walked past the corridor leading toward the study, he caught the edges of a private conversation between his nanny, Maria, and one of the senior aides. It was only a few words, spoken softly, but they landed with the force of thunder. "It's confirmed, it's not temporary anymore." George stopped mid-step. His throat tightened, his chest constricted, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. Maria turned and saw him standing there. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide, his body frozen in the doorway of a truth too heavy for a child to carry. She reached for him instinctively, but George had already begun to cry, not loudly, not with dramatic outbursts, but with quiet, trembling sobs that shook his shoulders. He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. The past 7 weeks had already been full of strange changes. Prince Louis, once bursting with energy and mischief, had missed more school, skipped more outings, and spent more time curled under blankets than chasing Charlotte through the halls. George had noticed. He had felt the difference. And now those words confirmed what his heart had been trying to deny. George asked only one question, barely above a whisper. "Does Mum know?" Maria nodded slowly. "Yes," she said gently. "She's known for a while." But instead of soothing him, that answer stung. It made George feel smaller, more powerless. The idea that this pain had been living inside their home, unspoken, undisclosed, carefully hidden behind calm faces and scheduled days, made him feel as though he had been walking through a storm without realizing the sky was already falling. He had always tried to be the brave one, the one who smiled at parades, who stood tall for photographers, who acted older than his years. But in that moment he wasn't an heir or a future king. He was only a brother, scared, heartbroken, and helpless. Later that morning, Catherine found him curled up in the family sitting room, his hands clasped tightly as though he could hold the world together by force alone. She sat beside him without speaking at first. She didn't rush to reassure him. She didn't try to talk him out of what he felt. She simply stayed there, a steady presence beside his trembling fear. Eventually, George whispered the question he'd been holding inside like a stone. Will he get better? Catherine's voice was calm, careful, steady, but her eyes revealed what she could not fully say. He'll have to live with this, she told him softly, but we'll be right beside him every step of the way. In that moment, something broke open between mother and son, and the fear that had been locked behind palace silence finally became real, spoken, and shared. That conversation gave George clarity, but it did not give him peace. Because clarity doesn't always comfort, it sometimes just sharpens the edges of reality. The palace walls were designed to keep secrets inside, but the truth now pressed hard from within. Catherine and William had hoped to shield their children until the last possible moment, but moments like this don't arrive on a schedule. They happen when they happen. And now, while George struggled to carry what he had learned, the rest of the family was already bracing for something even heavier, the official confirmation that would make everything irreversible. For Catherine, there was one date that would remain carved into her memory with painful clarity. It was the day the final envelope arrived from St. Mary's Medical Centre in London. There was no fanfare, no alarm, no dramatic messenger, just a courier, a plain folder, and a few neatly typed paragraphs. Yet inside those paragraphs lived a truth no mother ever wants to read. The language was clinical, cold, measured, chronic condition confirmed, requires long-term care and stress management. The words were designed to sound professional, but to Catherine they read like a sentence placed on her child's future. She had noticed the signs in Louis since late September, subtle at first, easy to excuse, shorter walks, more frequent naps, moments where his body seemed tired before his spirit was ready to stop, even a faint shake in his right hand that appeared and disappeared like a warning she didn't want to name. Still, nothing prepares you for finality. Catherine read the report in silence in her private sitting room. Her hands didn't tremble, her breath didn't break, but inside something collapsed. This wasn't just medical information. It was a new life unfolding, one that could no longer hide behind routine, optimism, or hope that it would simply pass. That evening, when William returned from a briefing in London, the house felt strangely still. The fireplace was lit, but warmth didn't reach the quiet in the air. Catherine handed him the envelope without speaking. William read it once, then again. Minutes passed without a word. Then he finally looked up and asked the question that mattered most to him as a father. How much do the children know? Catherine shook her head. Not enough, she replied. And the real question they faced wasn't medical. It was moral. When do you tell a child that his life, or his brother's life, will never be quite the same again? Inside Kensington Palace, subtle shifts began almost immediately. Staff who had served the family for years noticed the new rhythm. Meetings delayed, events quietly removed, school pickups rearranged. It wasn't scandal, it was survival. A quiet plan formed, one focused on privacy, emotional safety, and care. The palace wasn't collapsing, but it was moving, changing its shape around a child who needed more than tradition. A new kind of royal protocol had begun, guided not by ceremony but by compassion. Yet even compassion came with fear. Now that Catherine and William knew exactly what they were facing, the next decision felt heavier than the diagnosis itself. How much would the world be allowed to see? Rumors had already started. Whispers traveled through media-backed channels, and royal watchers began studying recent photos, noticing what they believed were clues. Catherine and William didn't want to invite the world too close, but they also knew silence could become dangerous. If they didn't speak, someone else might speak for them, and that could turn a private struggle into a public spectacle. As the days passed, it was George who carried the weight the heaviest. What began as silent tears became quiet withdrawal. At school, teachers noticed he no longer raised his hand, no longer laughed during break time, no longer joined conversations the way he used to. He stared out windows for long stretches with his notebook untouched, as if his thoughts had become too loud to place on paper. Even classmates began to sense something was wrong, though none of them could understand the burden he carried. It wasn't academic, it wasn't childish drama. It was the frightening knowledge that the person you love most can't simply be protected by wanting it hard enough. At home, George changed even more. The routines that once grounded him fell away. No morning football with the guards, no music practice, no late-night chats with Charlotte. Even at meals, he barely spoke. Charlotte tried to comfort him in the only way a younger sister can: gentle touches, quiet words, small jokes meant to pull him back into the world. But George brushed her off, not out of coldness, but because grief makes people retreat when they don't know where to place their fear. One night, the family tried to bring warmth back into the house. Catherine suggested a movie. William brought out a board game. Louis smiled weakly and leaned against Charlotte, trying to be present even when his energy was. George stayed silent. He excused himself early and went upstairs. Alone in his room, he pulled out an old photo album filled with snapshots from happier years. Louis laughing on the beach, building sandcastles, running without hesitation. George wept into his pillow, whispering words that broke him even more. "I should have known." As if love should have come with the ability to predict pain. As if being an older brother meant being responsible for what you could never control. Catherine came to him that night and sat at the foot of his bed. She didn't offer advice or false reassurance. She didn't try to rush him into strength. She listened. And when George finally admitted that he didn't know how to help his brother, Catherine answered with the simplest truth of all. "You don't have to fix it, you just have to love him, that's what matters." In that moment, something inside George loosened. He was okay, but he wasn't alone. And for the first time in days, he let his mother hold him without resisting. Meanwhile, Maria, the nanny who had cared for the children for years, felt the household changing in a way she had never seen before. She had weathered royal tour, press frenzies, and sleepless nights, but nothing prepared her for watching Louis' spark dim slowly or seeing George grieve in silence. When Charlotte began asking quiet questions and George began disappearing into himself, Maria knew the children needed guidance, not just protection, but truth they could understand. On a frosty morning, she approached Catherine privately and said gently, "I think the children know more than we realize. They're hurting and they need guidance." Catherine listened, eyes tired, voice low, and whispered back, "So do I." In that admission, something human broke through the walls of rank and roll. Two women, one royal and one not, bound by love for the same child, making the same decision. The children would not be left alone in the dark. They began planning small family moments, painting sessions, story hours, evening walks, spaces where George, Charlotte, and Louis could reconnect without cameras, schedules, or pressure. Those moments became sacred. They didn't erase the fear, but they gave the family something fear couldn't steal: closeness. Maria became more than a nanny. She became the calm in an emotional storm, yet even she knew a larger storm was building outside the palace walls. Pressure was mounting. Speculation grew louder. And the risk increased that someone outside the family would break the story first. It was then that William reached his breaking point. He had spent weeks balancing royal duty with fatherhood, walking a tightrope between the institution's instincts and his own. But eventually, the whispers, the prodding, and the endless drafting felt like something cold and wrong. This wasn't about the crown anymore, it was about his son. In a tense meeting, William issued a quiet ultimatum. Either we speak on our terms or we lose the story forever. The message landed hard. It wasn't just for the press team, it was for the entire system. William refused to let strategy overtake humanity. He had seen what secrecy and image control had done in the past, and he wasn't willing to repeat it. Catherine stood beside him, silent but firm. Then she nodded. The decision wasn't made by pressure, it was made by love. In the days that followed, everything moved quickly. Drafts were rewritten, schedules cleared, preparations made. Maria helped Catherine prepare the children gently, explaining that their parents might speak to the world soon, not to invite attention, but to protect Louis from rumor and distortion. George asked the question only a child would ask when faced with public attention. Will people be kind? Catherine answered honestly. We can't control that, but we can control what we say. When the statement was finally recorded, it did not feel like a political document. It felt like a message from a family. No titles, no theatrical language, just truth spoken carefully with the weight of love behind it. When the video was released, the world reacted instantly. Headlines spread across major outlets, social media filled with sympathy messages and support. People weren't stunned by scandal, they were stunned by sincerity. They saw not a monarchy but a father speaking like any father would when protecting his child. Outside the palace gates, candles began to appear. Children's drawings were left quietly, as if strangers were trying to offer softness to a family they would never truly know. One sign, written in a child's hand, read, "Be strong, Lou Bug, we love you." Catherine saw it from a car window and reportedly turned away, overwhelmed not by attention but by kindness. But not all reactions were gentle. Some tabloids demanded details, questioned what condition Louis had, implied more was being hidden. The palace remained firm, no further statements. The family had spoken. Now it was time to focus on Louis, not the noise. As the public conversation swirled, the family withdrew from the spotlight. Their priorities shifted fully inward. New routines formed. Emotional healing became the mission. And behind closed doors, something quietly powerful began to happen. The siblings began to find each other again. One evening, George knocked gently on Louis's bedroom door. For days they had barely spoken, both avoiding the heaviness between them. But George carried something special, a small book they had made together with Maria, filled with drawings, letters, and memories. Louis looked up, surprised. "Is that for me?" he asked. George smiled softly. "It's always been for you." They sat together on the floor, flipping through pages, cloud castles, crayon notes. A promise written in childish handwriting that somehow carried the weight of an oath. "Lou Bug forever." Louis laughed quiet. The tension cracked. Then Louis leaned his head against George's shoulder and asked the question he had been holding inside. "Am I going to be okay?" George didn't hesitate. "You already are," he told him. "You just don't see it yet." That night the family played a board game, Louis's favorite. He hesitated at first, unsure of his energy, unsure of himself, but George nudged him gently. "Come on," he said, "just try." Louis agreed. And for the first time in a long while, laughter returned to the room, not forced, not practiced, but real. Catherine sat quietly by the fireplace and felt something shift. Her sons were finding their way back to each other. From then on, George began walking Louis to his room each night. They read short stories, talked about the day, shared small thoughts that made the world feel less heavy. One night George whispered, "I'll be with you the whole way, okay?" Louis nodded. "Even if I get sad?" he asked. George answered without wavering, "Especially if you get sad." They weren't royal figures in that moment. They were simply two boys rediscovering their bond through quiet courage. In the days after the public reveal, Catherine stepped back from public duties, not out of weakness but out of focus. She held a series of private meetings with medical experts, education consultants, and advisors. The objective was simple: build a structure around Louis's life that prioritized health and emotional security above all else. School schedules were adjusted, mornings began later, outdoor breaks increased, support was integrated quietly to avoid drawing attention. Catherine worked with the school to designate a private counselor trained in long-term care for children. In one meeting, she said clearly, "We're not hiding him, we're teaching him how to live with this without fear." She applied the same approach to future public engagements. Each appearance would be evaluated case by case, no fixed roles, no pressure to perform. As one aide put it quietly, this wasn't about raising a perfect prince, it was about raising a strong boy. Late at night, Catherine began journaling again. In the quiet, she wrote longhand, processing the past months and the new reality ahead. One entry captured what she now understood more deeply than ever. The world sees crowns, but children carry hearts, and hearts are what truly need guarding. As Catherine laid the foundation for Louis's future, the monarchy itself faced a question of its own. Would tradition dictate the response, or would the institution follow the family's lead? In a rare private meeting, the king addressed senior staff with unusual softness. He spoke not in strategy but in memory. He acknowledged what it means to grow up under a microscope, how scrutiny shapes a child, and how the mistakes of the past had cost the family dearly. He urged those in the room to choose protection over repetition, humanity over image. For once, the institution listened. Later, the king called Catherine. He didn't speak as monarch, but as a grandfather. He told her she had shown more strength than most would ever understand, and that one day Louis would be proud. Catherine thanked him quietly. Outside, the city shimmered under winter frost. Inside, a family held tightly together, scarred but steady, grieving but united. And at the center of it all was a little boy reminding the world of something timeless. Even behind crowns, there are hearts that break, hearts that heal, and love that remains the strongest medicine of all. If you stayed until the end, you understand this wasn't just a royal story, it was a human one. So before you leave, tap like to support storytelling that goes deeper. Subscribe for more untold moments behind the headlines. And tell me in the comments, should public families share more or protect more?